to see all of you, those that were here yesterday, glad to have you back. Those that weren't here yesterday, you can fill in, but it's not like crucial. Like it is layering on, but you can get this even without being here yesterday. I think of the series of the 4, this might be my favorite one. I think, although I might say that with every next one, I'm not sure. And you're getting it. I mean, it's so fresh. I was literally there 10 days ago. So when working on this and pulling up the photos that I was taking, I was like, it was every photo I had to let go of. I was like, oh. So it's really like this kind of precious thing. And yeah, when I say I'm excited, it's like just like, I guess it might be the baseline about this event. And we're just gonna jump in. Hop. Okay. So we're going to look today at it's interesting. I wrote the international, it's actually the national pavilions within the Venice Biennale, and then go into the American Pavilion. You can see there's an extra S there that doesn't need to be there. Sorry about that. I will just say, I had someone ask me after the session yesterday, why do I say Biennale and not biannual? And does that mean something specific? So I do want to say Biennale is the Italian word for biannual. Okay, so that's the same. The thing is that basically the Venice Biennale invented this whole concept of having a biannual large international art event. So any biannual you've heard of in the world, in Miami, in New York, wherever it is, the fact that it's a bi-yearly event comes from this original event. And when people say the Biennale, they actually mean, it's like when people say Harav, like the rabbi, and everyone's supposed to know who we're talking about. So when people say the Biennale, they mean the Venice Biennale. Okay, so that's kind of to give an idea of that, because I thought it was a good question. We're looking here at the map of the Giardini, the gardens, the original or the first site of the national, first the Italian and then the national pavilions in Venice, Italy. And at this point, there are 30 national pavilions in the Giardini, in the gardens. You can see kind of their make. What started as the Italian pavilion is now what we saw yesterday, the central pavilion. And actually the Italian pavilion of the contemporary art is shown in the Arsenale, and hopefully we'll get to that in my highlight session next week. So you can see here the different pavilions. You can see the US is right here in the center. We're going to talk about this. Israel is kind of in the US backyard, literally. And what we're going to do today is kind of understand, we're going to see the art, but also look at the national pavilions and how they reflect contemporary politics, what's going on in the world today. So this is a good kind of beginning to understand what happened. This is the Dutch, the pavilion of the Netherlands. You can see it's over here. Decided this year to give their pavilion to Estonia. So you can see the pavilion, and another thing to note is the fact that these pavilions, you know, the word will probably make you think of a grand building, and that's the case. These are permanent buildings within the Giardini that are built and maintained and funded by the countries that own them. Okay, so these aren't like erected each time for the Biennale. They're there throughout the years. They're erected by the national architects and government of those countries. They're maintained by them. And actually, legally, when you step into one of those buildings, you're politically standing on the soil of the country that owns that building. Okay, so it's a fascinating thing to also understand. It's a political entity. It's not just a building. It's not just an exhibition space. So Holland, and you can see here the names on the buildings are the names of the countries in Italian. So Olanda would be the Italian way of saying Holland or the Netherlands. And they gave their pavilion this year to Estonia in a move which they speak of to allow younger countries to exhibit in the central place. I'll just mention, it's an interesting move. They decided to show outside the Giardini, but their exhibition this year is extremely, people will see it as provocative. I thought it was beautiful, but it would be something that is maybe hard to show in such a central place. They decided to make a move and show it in the city as part of the collateral events. And they gave having it, their pavilion, instead of having it empty, they decided to give it to Estonia. And there was this whole news now, and it actually forms new diplomatic relationships with this country. So this is kind of a move that can happen. Just so you kind of see this, you're walking through the gardens there and kind of encountering these beautiful buildings. And I just wanted you to see a few of them. This is the Canadian Pavilion. We're not seeing the art, and actually it didn't grab my attention so much as the building itself, which was stunning. And you can see the architecture kind of going around the tree. The Hungarian Pavilion, which really, I spent more time outside looking at this crazy building than inside looking at the art. But I did want you to get an understanding of the size, the grandeur of this place, because you're walking through these gardens and you're encountering these amazing, amazing buildings. You can see here the German pavilion, the Egyptian pavilion, all these names of countries, and you're literally entering country after country. And another interesting thing to note, this is the Serbian pavilion, which was once the area, the space itself, the earth itself was given to the Nordic countries and to Greece, to Sweden and Greece. And then they were transferred to Yugoslavia and Romania. And then it was named Serbia. So you're getting, like, you're witnessing, even before you enter any space, you're kind of witnessing politics in the making and how nations are moving and transferring. And it plays out in this one space, which is Italy. Once again, I'm saying Venice is like the best place for this to happen, as it took such a huge role in a financial and in terms of merchants across the sea, across both the Roman and the Byzantine empires. So it had that kind of base to allow this type of thing, and it actually is still happening today. Another thing I wanted to mention, we're not going into the French pavilion. I know there's a lot we're not doing today, but that's fine, because literally there's no way to go everywhere. And I picked for you the best of the best, and also some of the entrances and exits, because what I wanted you to see, I was walking towards here, I saw this structure, then I came here, I saw it was the exit door. I love that it was written the end instead of exit. It was beautiful. And then I went around the building to the entrance here of the French Pavilion, and you can see they kind of played with the entrance too. It's not, there's an addition on the regular entrance, and that's something that happened in many of the pavilions this year, a play on the entrance regarding the building itself and the way people enter the building as part of the exhibition. We're going to see that in more depth in the American Pavilion, and actually on Thursday also with the Israeli Pavilion. So that was something that was quite kind of common in what was going on here. You can see the Polish pavilion over here, the Greek here behind the tree with the long queue. And hopefully I'll get to the Polish pavilion also in my highlights, because it's a beautiful pavilion. We're not going to see it today. The British pavilion, you can see the entrance here. You can see a snippet of the exhibition, and we're actually, even though they won the national award, we are not stepping into the British pavilion to an extent. It's a kind of a sonic history of marginalized group in Britain. And I took this picture and I loved it. Just this woman, kind of the security guard in the pavilion, and she matched the pavilion so beautifully. I couldn't not take a photo of her. But I also wanted you to get a sense of how each entering each pavilion, you just enter a whole different world, quite exhausting, I must say. And we're coming to the Belgian Pavilion, which we will enter and talk about for a moment. The Belgian Pavilion, if you remember from yesterday, was the first national pavilion to be built in the Giardini in 1907. So it's the first one. You can see the flag, and I don't know if you can notice this over here, this little red thing, which is actually a ball. So it was really, I mentioned people were playing with the entrances and exits of the pavilions, and standing outside of this, you see this very grand building. It looks very serious, very heavy. And then you see this ball, it's as if a child was playing, with a ball, and it just was thrown up there and no one took it off. It seems really how could that even happen in such a place where everything is so meticulous? I mean, everything is manicured, and it's hard to, it's not even centered. So that's kind of the mindset, even when I was walking in, of what's going on? And then walking in, actually, it's full of videos of different children's games. And the artist, Francis Elias, he's a Belgium artist, amazing, amazing artist, basically for a few years was traveling the world and filming children playing games, just the way they play. And the pavilion is full of child laughter. And I must say that for me, especially after the pandemic and distancing and everything, walking into this pavilion, everyone is smiling. The sound is like of child play. And there's something really nice. You can see here on this side, and this is something we'll also send you. The name he gave this exhibition is The Nature of the Game. And actually, all the videos are free and open online for anyone to watch, which is an extremely generous thing by the artist. We'll be sending it to you so you can enjoy it yourself. And I just chose here 2 examples of things that you're seeing them on screens and they're around you from such different places in the world. This is a game where they put this watercolor on snails and they draw circles around them, and then they wait to see who's winning the race, and they each have a snail. The video actually ends with rain pouring down, so all the kids go away and you see the snails, and slowly the snails are washed off their color back to their normal snail-like life. But it's this beautiful game which really depends on a weather, on a climate. And then we're seeing this game over here with little marbles played with goalies in this space, again, depending on climate, on dirt, on sand, and you're in this pavilion just experiencing all this fun. To me, it was, especially since Belgium is at the entrance of the Giardini, it was such a reviving experience in terms of especially coming together after the pandemic. We're moving to another political event, and this is the Russian Pavilion, and the Russian Pavilion was closed. So basically, the curators of the Russian Pavilion decided that because of the war, and because of their own feelings towards the government and being against the war, they will not open the Russian Pavilion in the Venice Biennale. So actually it's closed. You can just look at the building, and I could take a photo, and it's hard to see inside, but it's just storage inside. And this is an act, a political act by the Russian curators themselves, making a choice not to open the pavilion as an act. It's quite a rebellion against their own country. It's also giving up an opportunity, it doesn't come often, an opportunity for a curator, for artists to show at this world art event. So the choice to leave it closed is quite a powerful one. On the other side, the Ukrainian Pavilion Ukrainians have been exhibiting in the Biannual since the mid-1990s, and countries that don't have pavilions in the Giardini, their locations move around. Many of them exhibit in the Arsenale Corderie. We're seeing here 2 of the alleys of the Arsenale right now in these beautiful spaces. So many of the pavilions exhibit there, or they exhibit throughout the city. Right, so you're going through Venice and suddenly like, oh, the Cuban pavilion, oh, the Afghan pavilion, oh, and you just walk into these pavilions. So the Ukrainian pavilion was exhibiting this year in the Arsenale. This is the installation by the Ukrainian. Behind, by the way, in the room is actually the Kosovo pavilion, which was very much fun. We're not going to talk about it now, but this is the Ukrainian pavilion. And actually, the name of this work by Pavlo Makov is called Fountain of Exhaustion. It's an ongoing work since the 1990s that travels in a variety of ways to touch on what it is to be human in our world. And it gets even more, I'd say, potent with what's going on in Ukraine these days. You can see it closer. And what happened with this one was that because of the war broke after the decision to exhibit this work in the pavilion. But because of the war, it was a lot of effort done by the Venice Biennale team and other European countries to get the artists out of Ukraine to the Biennale to show this work. And actually, because they couldn't get the original fountain out of Ukraine, they had to manufacture everything in Europe with the help of other European countries. So this fountain of exhaustion becomes kind of a new iteration of a work, of an ongoing work. And what I wanted to do here is just, because, you know, you enter the space, I wanted you to just to hear the sound and kind of get some of the feeling of what it is. Okay. So it does that every time. Okay. So you can see in this, it's quite, I'll go one back just so you can see. To go back. Yes. It's not a very, I was looking a lot for the Ukrainian pavilion because I heard a lot about it. There were other events to support Ukraine in the city, but they were more during the opening weeks of the Biennale. So that's end of April, beginning of May. So they weren't up anymore when I was there 10 days ago. It was interesting for me to see how the artist chose to put something very concise. And it's not explicitly about the war and what's going on now. It's in that way, to me, it was very moving because it's talking for me about the human condition and also about how the one affects the many. The trickle down effect, if you want, is something that for me was very apparent there, and what one action, how it can emanate and move forward and forward and forward. And obviously you can sit here, or not obviously, I wanted a photo without people, but now I'm realizing I need to mention. So sitting there in front of it and just slowing down and allowing that trickle of water in this fountain to kind of sink in was very powerful. Okay, put that again. Okay, so we're moving on to a beautiful pavilion. And if you notice here, what's written, it's written the Sami Pavilion. Okay, who are the Sami people? And this is actually the pavilion that is originally of the Nordic countries. So Finland, Norway, and Sweden. And they decided to give their pavilion this time around to the Sami people. The Sami people are the indigenous people of those three countries. And I want to make it very clear, it's not like saying this is our pavilion and we'll choose indigenous artists to exhibit in it. It's not the case. It's saying we're letting go of any exhibition of ours as countries, and we're handing over the space and the pavilion, the funding, everything to the Sami people. This would be equivalent of America handing over their US pavilion at Venice Biennale to Native Americans. And just not having USA as part of the Venice Biennial, having, you can see here, the Sami Pavilion. It's a very sharp political move with indigenous people that are in quite a battle with these countries. And imagine this, I'm assuming this is clear, but especially as an, I don't know about you guys, but as an Israeli, I have never heard of the Sami people. I would not know about the indigenous plight in those countries if I weren't in the Venice Biennial, reading about them, seeing them, hearing them. So you can understand how this art event also shifts consciousness for so many people that otherwise would just not know about these things at all. So, and personally, I love this pavilion. Like, it's beautiful what they're showing there and the space itself. So entering the space, first of all, you can see the size, you can see how the building, they didn't cut down the trees, they incorporated them inside, how the building allows natural light in. It's huge, it's really beautiful. There are 3 Sami artists exhibiting in this pavilion, one from each indigenous area, from Finland, from Norway, and from Sweden. And we are going to look, finally, I get to say, we are going to look at some of their art. So this is what it looks like kind of in a general view when you enter in. And this is work by Anders Suna. Again, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing the names right. It's a huge painting installation. You can see the size of it, and you can see here the first panel, and we're going to see a few more. Extremely vibrant, beautiful size. I mean, you know, it's way bigger than human size. And actually, Anders Suna is an artist and a herder. He herds reindeers, and for generations, his family has been in fight with the Swedish government over land, okay, over indigenous land and how it's farmed and the legalities of it. And these painting panels are basically the story of his family's plight. And I don't know if you notice, it took me a moment to notice, because one moment, I'm going to go back, right? Because you see this huge painting and it's extremely colorful, and actually it's very beautiful. And there's something about it that is kind of, it makes you smile until you realize what you're looking at. And I don't know if you can notice, it took me a moment, all of these folders in between that are functioning kind of like columns of colors within them, but actually they hold the documents over documents over documents of the legal interactions between his family and the government over the land. So what seems kind of very innocent, very much about color. Oh, I don't want you to read it yet. Very much about color turns out to be this heavy documentation of their plight. There are also on them, you can see here these QR codes. I'm going to send you also this, where you can link in and listen to like have an audio guiding through the paintings and through this plight. I also loved how all of this is held together from behind, kind of, we see also behind the scenes of the paintings, it's visible to us. And this is, it's a teeny tiny part of a quote that is in the text by Anders Suna, which I think to me holds maybe the power, not maybe, it holds the power of art in our world. And especially coming from someone going through all of this, choosing to be an artist. And he says, imagine being able to speak all the world's languages without saying a sound, to reach people's hearts first and then their consciousness. The anger you are carrying suddenly finds a way to emerge, but in a more creative form, stronger than iron. Art is that, which I think, I mean, just looking at the power of what he created and holding those words with it, and, you know, even how bureaucracy turns into columns of color. It's, I don't know, it's just, it's beautiful. we kind of moved, we're still in the pavilion. Over here is his painting. And here we're looking at the work, one moment, by Paulina Feodorov. She's from the indigenous area of Finland. And this is a kind of video performance looking actually at the land and at the climate effect, because actually these fights, especially in those areas over the lands, have also very crucial climate effects. And so she kind of touches on that. I wanted you to see, this is from the side, and these screens are leaning on traditional fabrics and devices of traveling within the country. So they're leaning on those. And then we can see far back the works here. I just love the trees. I had to take more photos of them. The works by the third artist from the Norwegian indigenous areas, Marit Anne Sara. And actually, she works here with reindeer skin, which is native to the people there. Beautiful sculptures, I must say, far less to me in need of explanation. And I was spending a lot of time trying to take photos that capture the beauty of how the light goes through. She was working mainly with skin and also parts of the skin from the interior, from the stomach, to talk about the carried trauma. Just beautiful, beautiful works, which are also kind of very jarring when you think where they come from. So these are her works in the pavilion, and you kind of step around them. You step around them, and they're very much like, if in front of the painting installation, it's kind of standing, it's going across, and then in front of the videos, you're sitting, you're watching them. With these, they really move you around. Like, you go around them and have this feeling that the more you go around, like the more you want to go around and see all the intricacies and all the part, and really encountering colors and forms that are unfamiliar, at least to me, coming from the Middle East, but I'm assuming for many of us, so unfamiliar. And here what I wanted to show you, because we saw the entrance, which was actually the exit, and this is the official entrance of the Nordic Pavilion. And when you come at it, you don't see it. You're seeing this artwork, which is hiding, right? The original writing of this pavilion, Finlandia, Norvegia, and Svezia, which are the Italian pronunciations and writing of these countries. So again, you can see in every space and place, there's this play of the relationship between the Sami people and the Nordic people, and what happens when the pavilion is given over. Okay, I put a blank slide, not by mistake, but on purpose. So we have like a breathing moment, and we're moved to the American Pavilion. So we're going to spend the next kind of the next part of this session, and I'm just going to keep at the chat to see if there's anything crucial that I can answer. This is a good question. Are countries invited to participate? If participation is open, why aren't more countries represented? So there are tons of countries, and most of them are represented. I'm showing just a few. The 30 countries are in the Giardini. Basically, the last time pavilions were constructed in the Giardini was in 1948. After World War II, with all the transitions of countries and nations, you can understand how Israel sneaked in at that time. But there's no more room in the Giardini. Then in 1980, when the Arsenale Corderie was opened, more countries exhibited there, and then furthermore countries exhibit around the city. So when you get the map of the Venice Biennale, you have a map of the Giardini, a map of the Arsenale, and a map of what's called collateral, which is all across the city. So you're like going around the city, and suddenly you see a sign and it says Uzbekistan, and you just go up the stairs, or the Emirates. Also, and it's crazy. Actually, the Emirates are exhibiting this year in the Arsenale. And there are also new countries entering the Venice Biennial. For instance, in the Arsenale, Lebanon showed for the first time this year, Jordan or the Amman showed for the first time this year. So it also is growing, but there isn't any more room to build these types of pavilions. You can see why it's such a powerful move for a nation to give its pavilion to a different nation, same as Holland gave their pavilion to Estonia to give a young country such a central place. Okay, so there is a lot of movement, but there isn't space in the Giardini itself to build. There actually isn't space in Venice itself to build any other place. There's a question here about, so I'm saying the Arsenale, we spoke about it a little yesterday. The Arsenale was an area, the only walled part of Venice, which was originally in the 10th, 11th, 12th century, a place where the Venetians built their ships, and it was guarded by walls so that no one could see them. In the 1980s, that whole space was transformed to be the additional venue of the Venice Biennial, starting with the Architecture Biennial, and it was very unique because of the unique architecture of that space, and now holds also the artists, the Art Biennale. And yeah, I'll refer you to our previous session for all the a lot of information. Okay, but thank you for those questions. I'm happy I peeped, because I think there's it's sometimes hard to understand the scale of this event until you're there. It's huge. I mean, it's really throughout the city, and you really meet every nation possible. So this is an image of the American Pavilion circa 1930s when it was built. And you can see here, I wrote this because it's really important. Unlike other pavilions that were built and owned by governments, this one was privately owned. Okay, and you can see it, the ownership has moved across the years, but on the one hand, it's the American Pavilion, and on the other hand, it's privately owned. It's not the only country, I must say. Some countries transitioned, and for instance, Holland is now also it's owned by a foundation. So in the same way, the Venice Biennial itself transitioned from being fully governmental to being its own entity and foundation. This is true, but America was the one that started off like this. You can see, and I'm showing you what the building looked like, because we're going to see how much it changed for this year. You can see it here during the Architecture Biennale. You can see here some Hebrew and some Arabic, because they were hosting a variety of works for the Architecture Biennale. And just before we hop in, I wanted you to see this image from '68 of demonstrations in front of the American Pavilion in the Biennale, because even though it's privately owned, because of how this event works, these pavilions are considered, and by the way, it is considered a kind of American soil in that way. So the way they're related to in Venice and by other people is as representative of the country, even though it's privately owned. So you can see their demonstrations in front of it in '68. Okay, and we're skipping from '68 to our days. And this is me kind of arriving from the gardens to this work by Simone Lee. Simone Lee won the Golden Lion Prize this year as an artist, not as the National Pavilion. We're going to talk about that also in a moment. And you can see her work over here that starts actually before we even go into the pavilion, where she covers the pavilion itself with these wood columns and this straw, in a way a West African palace would look like. So you can see here, and it's a fascinating thing. I was really blown away by seeing you get both buildings like one on top of the other in a way. You get to experience this colonial building from the 1930s with the bricks and the columns and the neoclassical look. And then on top of it is almost draped or constructed these columns and straw, which turn it into a completely different structure. This work that kind of welcomes the viewers as they come, is called Satellite. And I mean, the feeling is, and this is, you know, me from far away looking up. So the feeling is really overbearing. And you can see here where the kind of idea of the sculpture comes from, recalls the form of Dimba, a bust of a woman used by the Baga people of West Africa to commune with their ancestors. But it's combined, and you can see it with the name of the sculpture, Satellite, with the satellite kind of shape instead of a face, kind of standing there at the entrance and transmitting towards the garden, so that you see this work from very far away. You can see here, this is large enough to walk under. Okay, so it's huge. You kind of, it's a very, very physical experience, and maybe that's one important thing to understand about the works of Simone Leigh, because on the one hand, I will mention all the associations and where she comes from and all of that, but her work is physical, and the impact is physical. You feel your own size and body, and the grandeur of the works has quite an impact. Now the entrance is over here, and you can see from here, we're already seeing something. Can you see this? Like, we're seeing what's awaiting us inside, even before we enter. And just before we enter, just a few more words about Simone Leigh. This is her, and she actually started gaining her fame in her 40s. Just about 15 years ago, with work that started more as performance work, and slowly and gradually grew into sculptures and then video works. And we're seeing here Brick House, which you saw, if you were with me yesterday, you saw at the entrance hall of the Arsenale. I'll show it at the end of our presentation today again. And this is on the High Line. If you remember, Cecilia Alemani, the curator, the Italian-American, New York-based Italian curator of the Venice Biennale, is also the curator of the High Line. And she was the curator that commissioned this work from Simone Leigh to the High Line. I actually saw this on the High Line, and I must say the impact on the High Line was even greater than the one in the Biennale. Because like, you walk in the High Line, you know, it's quite constricting, and then you kind of happen upon this huge work. So you can see also all the connections with the curator bringing her favorites from the US to the Biennale. And this is as you enter the space of the American Pavilion. The name of the exhibition is Sovereignty by Simone Leigh. These are two photos. So the pool is much larger than this, and you kind of enter and need to go around the pool towards this woman. Don't worry, I did it for you. You go around and suddenly you're confronted with this image. Again, her sculptures and figures are larger than life. So as you approach, you feel smaller, okay? And you can see also the outside from here. This work is called Last Garment. And we'll talk for a moment in the next work more about the references and where they come from. But I also want you to see they're larger than life, but they hold all the motion and movement of the body, of the fabric. The water is real. So the reflection is real. So, and you have that feeling. It's hard to see here, but we will see in the next slides how her figures are very realistic, but they don't have eyes, and they don't have like, the eyes aren't open, or they're kind of closed, and the ears are closed. So on the one side, you feel very close, very intimate, but on the other hand, they're kind of walled off. They're not giving you information. Entering the next room, we see this sculpture, Jug, and we're going to talk in a moment about the cowrie shells that Simone Leigh uses in her works, because we'll see it again and I'll talk about it. And I also just wanted you, I don't know this random person, but it's a good way to understand the size of the works. And these two are in the same room. This work, Anonymous, is looking at Jug, and you can see again the size. And to understand how Simone Lee works and where she comes from, I brought to you her inspiration of a series that is extremely racist. We're not going to go into the whole works of James A. Palmer, but I will send you some reading material of these series that were depicting African-American people in a variety of ways and with a lot of stories that were extremely racist. And basically Simone Lee leans into these cultural appropriations, but takes them to as her own and recreates images that belong to her. Now, I also want to mention, and I don't know if you noticed the black and white. Okay, we've been seeing until now, just look at this, very clearly black material and white material. The way the light reflects on them is stunning. And that is also very, very, I'd say, powerful in the exhibition there. So this is kind of, you can see where she takes her inspiration from and then how far she goes with it. I will say this, she doesn't give hints in her exhibitions, and very much she talks about the fact that her works are actually meant for Black people, and anyone else can make the effort and learn what they don't know. She's very unapologetic. She wants to address Black people, Black women, bring forward history that was overlooked or untold. I think for me, especially talking about it, it's very special because I'm very far removed in a way from this history. And so maybe I'm more used to also making the effort and looking for the information and kind of searching for it. I found it very, very refreshing that in the gallery, there is hardly any text. The only text there is are the names of the works and the dates. I think I put it for you. No, I didn't. Just very small ones. So you walk through the gallery, and to me, it was exhilarating. Knowing on the one hand that she's leaning into these histories, but understanding that in terms of sculpting and material and figure and image, she is so generous. Like, she might say, the viewer needs to work if they want to know all the history. But here, just be present with these works, and the size and materials that she brings allow that. And to me, it's a very powerful combination of generosity while putting a lot of work on us, the viewers, to actually, if we want to know where she comes from, we need to go and work. Like, she's not going to hand it to us. You can see here, it's fascinating how the light plays on this. And this is another work going between the first hall and the second hall. You can see how difficult it is to photograph because of its height. You can see the play, and it kind of leans into the satellite work that we saw outside, but in a different way in form. And indoors kind of almost want to protrude outside of the building, and also the starkness of the black and white and the beauty of the form, and also the form, you know, of the very colonial building with kind of the basic forms that she uses. So thank you. There's a question here from Beverly about the materials. So she uses clay and porcelain and the straw as her materials. So it's mainly clay and porcelain, and I'm going to talk a little more about the way of making the sculptures in a moment. And you can see here, I was trying, I was spending a lot of time there, and I must say it's like, it's not full, but it's very grabbing. I was going back and forth because from every angle, it felt like I was seeing not only the sculptures literally in a new light, but also the building itself. And you can see here the play with this sculpture and Anonymous, the sculpture we just saw before, and how like every movement you make as the viewer reveals something new. This sculpture, I think I wrote, yes. Yes, this sculpture, unlike this is the first sculpture that she gave a real name. We'll see other how she titles them, but if you notice that I mentioned the white sculpture was called Anonymous, the jug. This sculpture is named Sharifa, and it's actually named after a contemporary Black American historian and writer. And I don't know if you can tell, you're going to see in a moment, this figure is huge. This figure is huge. And again, her eyes, they're not even exactly closed. It's just place for the eyes that aren't holes, but actually kind of closed as if they were held like this. And the ears are closed too. And the figure is on the one hand with a foot kind of going forward. There's a feeling of movement. She commands the space fully, but she's not, it's not about her like giving us what we're looking for. In a way, she's her for herself. You can see here the size, right? This is me taking the photo sitting down, and you can see, and there's the distance. That's how this is the height, but actually this is kind of a good understanding of the size. And Sharifa Rhodes Pitts, who's the writer that this work is named after, this is a quote by her after experiencing the sculpture. She says, "At Simon's direction, my body passed easily from woman to earth, water, fire, air, time." So Simone is really trying to take, on the one hand, it's women, but she's really giving them the space to command time and history in a different way. I'm just peeping at the time because I have 10 minutes left. We're okay. We're okay. I'm just going to play this video for you for a moment so you get to see it. This video is called Conspiracy. Maybe I'll do it without the sound. It's called Conspiracy. Simone creates also videos and performances, even though she's mostly known for her sculptures, and they take most of the space in the pavilion too. But you can see here, it's a sculpture based on the Anonymous we saw, which is based on the photograph that we saw, but it's during the video, it's meticulously built with straw as the skirt and then kind of put in fire, kind of like a human altar. And then, one moment, up, we go into the last space, which is stunning. Here, I did put it for you. This is all the text that there is in this room. So you enter this room with these 3 huge sculptures, beautiful works. You can see here also the materials she's using, the clay, the ceramic, the porcelain, and the straw. You can see the names. Cupboard is the name of this work. Sorry, Cupboard is this work. Sphinx is this work, and Maltinik is this work. And I want to see, first of all, it's really interesting how from every angle, like I was taking so many photos because something of the sizes and the angles was really powerful. You can see how in each area. And I do want to say about the cowrie shell that Simone Lee used. You saw it in the jug. We see it here. And in many of her works, also in Brick House, she uses it kind of as representing the female body, as representing absence and presence. The way she creates them, and this is another fascinating thing, they're created with molds that are based on watermelons. So, you know, because cowrie shells are small and these are huge. And watermelons in African-American history are a symbol of racism, or they were a very racist attribute, and then reappropriated. I don't know if I can say reappropriated. Not sure, then appropriated by African Americans as part of their culture. Again, I'll send you links to articles about how and why the watermelon became such a symbol. But in Jim Crow laws and in era, it was used a lot as a way to show the laziness and stupidity of slave life of African Americans in very extreme ways. So the fact that Simone Lee is actually using them to mold the cowrie shells based on the watermelons is again transfiguring this image and object into something different. Just a few more slides of this so you can see. I mean, really, they're beautiful. They're really, I mean, and that's what I mean in sculptural generosity. Even if we don't know anything about these works, just walking around them, the choice of form, the way she creates them. If you think of a woman's skirt and being under the skirt and how it's also a house and also a hut and also a home, she's giving so much in that way. And from each angle, you can see how it takes over the room. So you're really experiencing size in a very, very different way. And then you exit right back into satellite. And suddenly that satellite that you've seen before, it holds all that transmission of womanhood, of Blackness, of cultures mixed together and coming together in this very powerful way. We have, let's say I'll do 1 minute before we open for questions. I just wanted you to see again what I showed yesterday at the entrance of the Arsenale main exhibition is this work, Brick House, that was brought from the originally commissioned, I mean, this is the sculpture and it's now standing there. You now can see, you can see the cowrie shells, which you now know the significance of, and you can understand the size of this and what it feels like to enter. And you can see here the lack of eyes and ears. And so the figure is there, is present, but she's present for herself rather as a utility for another, which I think is a very powerful statement. The last slides I wanted to show you, this is exiting the Arsenale Corderie. There are more beautiful gardens. It's really endless. Like every time you think, oh, that's it. And then I go, there's more and it's beautiful. Is this sculpture called Cupboard. It's cast in bronze by Simon Lee. And that one is going to stay there. And it's just gorgeous to me. And I chose this as the ending slide. It was very interesting. I felt that there was, for me at least, there was a distance that came from respect with the sculpture, and something about how she was standing within this space of the gardens was majestic and beautiful. And it was very moving and beautiful to see that there's a piece of her work will remain in Venice, Italy. So we made it, and there are 5 minutes left for questions. So I'm gonna stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Shirel. That was amazing. Wow, you managed to put in so much in a short time.
Yeah, that was wow. I just really want to kind of maybe, hopefully also what you get is also the feeling of how much and how much more, because there is some, I'd say the Venice Biennale is like, it has a strong element of FOMO, fear of missing out in it. And you're just like, walking and walking from one place to the other, trying to see everything. You cannot see everything. If you saw at one of the first slides I showed you from far away, the Greek pavilion with that long line, and I was like, I cannot handle that. I do not know what the Greek pavilion was showing. We might talk, on Thursday about the Israeli pavilion, about this lines and making lines and what happens when people need to wait to enter a Biennale pavilion. Okay, so are there any questions? Let's see. You can place them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can help you to unmute. So we have here a comment. I see the skirts as a form of repress. I can understand why. I think in Simon Lee's case, it's very much, it's more a form that takes place of like a standing, a house, a space, and of commandeering the space, like taking up the space, and less the one of repression. So I can understand that, because I think we each come, and maybe it's an important thing to say, we each come to a work of art also with our own associations, right, and feelings, and those are valid. And I think what we try to do is to play between that and what the artist is trying to say. And to me, what's powerful actually about art is that those things can exist in a parallel way. They can both exist. So there's a question. I see Faith has her hand up, so we'll unmute you, and I'll just answer what is the outdoor sculpture by the Academia Bridge this time? I'm not sure 100% I know which bridge you're talking about, but there is the sculpture of the hands, which I now don't remember the name of the sculptor that created it, and it's there just outside of the Arsenale. But I'm not sure, Phyllis, which Academia Bridge you're talking about. So I'll have to check that out. Faith, let's let you ask your question. Hi.
Thank you. Hi, Shirel. My question is, who gets to decide what objects will be shown? Is that done by a committee?
Lovely.
That's question number one.
Yeah.
And I have two. The other one is very simple. I just want your email because I want the poem. Remember the poem I read on yesterday?
Yes.
I'd like a copy of that.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the second first.
Okay.
You'll receive a follow-up email. It's just taking a little longer to do because I'm doing all of these while traveling, but you'll receive that with also the link to the poem and everything. I'll also answer Lauren here that there will be also a video recording, and you'll receive that too. And your first question was, who gets to decide what's showing? So each national pavilion functions with usually a committee or a board that is based on how that pavilion functions. So you saw, for instance, the American one it's kind of overseen by the Peggy Guggenheim Foundation, and throughout the years they allow different foundations to take part, and then they invite the curator, which then invites the artist, and then the decision is of the artist and the curator. Sometimes there are group exhibitions, but each national pavilion gets its own kind of autonomy over its pavilion. I'll talk a little more about the procedure in the Israeli one, because that one I also know better of how it works. But it's the national pavilion that chooses how and what they're going to show.
So the emphasis was on African American. Is that what?
No, in the American Pavilion, they decide the invitation was to Simone Lee. I'm happy you're asking this. I will say this is the first time an African American artist is representing America in the Venice Biennial. So thank you for asking this, because if it wasn't clear, it's a historical moment. Okay.
It's also the first time that that she won the national prize.
Right, and she won the Golden Lion prize. The moment she's chosen, what is showed is her work, right? So it's not kind of her work. Is all about womanness and blackness and these histories. So the moment they chose her, at that point, she's going to show what she wants to show, and no one will interfere with that. So the choice is of the artist or of the artists. And then usually the artists also submit a proposal of what they will do. It works slightly differently in each country. Yeah, we have time for another question. So Beverly, would you like to ask?
Okay, I actually have two. And maybe I just didn't understand. I think you addressed it. So for any country's exhibit, how much does the flavor, politics of the government of the country at that time or during the time it's being planned play into it? I mean, think about the US, the changes, the extremes of the past couple.
So I think that's why I'm going to stop with that question, because it's a very good one. This is why I call this lecture Reflections on World Politics, because they're extremely influenced. I mean, the fact that the Nordic countries gave their pavilion to the Sami people, the fact that the Russian curators decided not to open their pavilion in the Biennale because of the war, like all of these things play a huge role. And in that way, there's this play between the politics, the government, and the art institutions that is very unique to the Venice Biennale. And that's why when you go to this event, you're experiencing art, but you're also experiencing kind of how politics plays out in a very deep way that later trickles on also to other places. So they're intertwined. I mean, these are national pavilions. When people see the US pavilion, they experience it as a representation of America in this time. So the choice of who to present in the pavilion is always kind of in the back of the mind. It always has this notion that people will experience this as a representing the country it's showing. So
Well,
absolutely.
I would venture to guess that during Trump's presidency, we wouldn't have had a Simone.
So look, I'll say this, you can notice that we're at war in Russia and the curators made their own decision
Right.
about the Venice Biennale. So there is I'd say there's a level of independency, right? And sometimes it mirrors it, and we're going to see that also with the Israeli pavilion. Sometimes it's representative of what's going on, and sometimes it's like what's going on, but in reverse as a counter or as a question towards these events. We're going overboard with time. Maybe we'll take one last question from Carolyn, and then we'll say goodbye for today. Yes, Carolyn.
Is that typical that the American Pavilion each year invites only one artist?
No, and these things change throughout the years, and they also changed along history. So if you go to the historical exhibitions of the pavilions and the American pavilions, you see group exhibitions with many artists showing. Throughout the years, it became more common I'd say, in the more established countries, it's more common to see one artist taking it. And in the younger countries or smaller countries, you'll more often see a group exhibition because they're trying to portray a varied kind of point of view of the country. So it changes, and it's also has been changing across time.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you especially to Shirel for sharing so much information. Again, we have another session on Thursday, right, about the Israeli Pavilion, the same time, same place, same link. So I hope to see you all there. Thank you very much, and goodbye. Have a nice afternoon.
Everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with recordings and links for your pleasure and learning forward. Thank you. Bye.